Hello, and welcome to the Ride of String podcast. I'm Kevin Sluter.
And I'm Matt Moreno.
And we are bringing you a show about orchestra teachers,
for orchestra teachers,
and those aspiring to be orchestra teachers.
As directors, one of the bigger challenges we face each year is retention and recruitment. We dedicate a great deal of time facilitating success for all of our students, while at the same time maintaining a culture and sense of belonging that keeps the players coming back each year. We sit down in this episode with Ryan Ross, a director who has successfully explored a variety of ways to achieve these goals.
So I think I came to education a little bit a roundabout way. I got into music through the public school system and really enjoyed that through middle school and high school. In college, I was one of those performance majors. And then by my master's degree, I was doing a conducting degree. Mm-hmm. And about the beginning of my second year of my master's, I had one of those realization moments that conductors don't find jobs. And I realized I would have to make money soon. So at the time, I went ahead and got a post-bac certification and got my my Texas certification along with my master's. And when I came out of my master's, I did my student teaching and very quickly fell in love with it. So at the time, actually, the plan was to teach for 3 or 4 years and maybe go back and do the doctorate and go that route. And I knew within 6 months of teaching that was where my heart was. Yeah. And the rest is history.
What are some of the different places you've taught so far?
So right out of grad school, I was really lucky. I got a job with the Tyler Youth Orchestra.
That's right.
Tyler's a little community about 2 hours east of Dallas. And so while I was doing that, I was student teaching. And then I got my first job where I was teaching at 5 different elementary schools a day in Rockwall ISD. We were actually starting the string program out there. So I taught beginners, 5th grade beginners, to 5 campuses a day.
I didn't know that. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
That's the kind of thing you only have the energy to do when you're 24.
Yeah, that's right.
And I stayed with Rockwall for a total of 4 years and was really lucky to grow that program up all the way through 8th graders. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I made the switch to teaching high school. So I taught in Louisville ISD, where
I was a feeder for you.
Yes, yeah. And I met both of you guys. And then shortly thereafter, I had the opportunity to work in Plano ISD, which is where I'm currently at. So I taught first at Jasper High School, which is a grade 9-10 high school. And then due to a retirement, I moved to the senior high that Jasper feeds, Plano West. And that's where I currently teach.
And then Matt moved from where he was to Jasper.
Yeah, so now I was after Louisville, I was at Frankford Middle School in Plano. And that also kind of feeds into Plano West. It feeds into Shepton on the other end and goes up. But yeah, once Ryan moved up to Plano West, I went up to Jasper, and I've been there. This is our 4th year.
4th year in this specific
in
job.
This structure, yeah.
And I took over for Ryan at Louisville High School when he left, and then I've been there since. So it's just been we're just kind of like little musical chairs with our.
You guys have my leftover jobs. But they are all wonderful jobs. They are all wonderful jobs with incredible kids.
So one of the main topics we wanted to talk with you about today, Ryan, is something you're probably very familiar with, is recruiting and retention across a very large program and cluster and feeder system. And I'm sure a lot of this stuff y'all will be able to talk back and forth about because you have to work together on it.
We get to work together.
You get to work together, that's right. You don't have to, you get to. You get the privilege. Yeah, have to. And so, I guess one question would be, so that everybody can kind of have a frame of reference here, what size programs are we dealing with throughout your cluster, to the best of your knowledge?
Okay, so there's Plano West, which is the 11th and 12th grade capstone campus, and we have 253 kids in our program this year. Plano West is then fed by the 2 feeder high schools, Jasper, where Matt teaches, and then Shepton High School. And Matt, you have...
And Jasper, we have somewhere between 210, 220 students.
And Shepton's a little smaller, but maybe around 170. And then each of those 2 high schools is in turn fed by 2 feeder middle schools. Some very large programs that push over 300 at some of them. Some are a little bit smaller, maybe 230, 240, but very large programs overall.
Well, and so to put it in comparison, like where I am, we are the high school, we're a 9 through 12 campus, and we're around 170, and our average middle school program is anywhere between 90 and 150,
right.
Something like that. So like when I look at recruiting and retention, I'm dealing with, almost half the numbers that you are there. And so, for us, it's when we're wanting to grow something, it's like every single kid, it's a little bit easier to get to every single kid and really, get them directly. How do you approach recruiting and retention with such a large group of kids and making that experience special for them and all that kind of stuff?
As well as it being so many campuses that they go through.
Yeah, instead of just hitting ninth grade and going right
in order to finally make it to you.
So, I mean, I'm sure you all feel the same way too. Anytime a kid is changing campuses, when they're moving from one school up to the next school, that is the critical time to make sure that we keep them. We lose a lot more kids between campuses than you do at your current campus. So, I mean, we really target our efforts at those key points, I think. So the 9th and 10th grade directors are working really hard to connect with and engage the 8th graders. And then I'm trying to do, along with my colleague, Amy Gross, we're trying to make sure that we're visible on the high school campuses as much as possible to make sure that those sophomores feel comfortable sticking around to join our program junior year at the senior high.
Yeah.
We have a lot of ways that we are reaching out to them. I mean, Matt, you would probably say the reason we lose kids the most, our area is very academically driven. Yep. Kids who are, wanting to take 10 AP courses a year, which is crazy hard because there's only 7 periods in the day. Kids just want to drop out because they want that 5.0 GPA boost that the AP courses give them instead of just the standard 4.0 that orchestra offers.
Yeah.
So, we have material that we start distributing throughout the cluster that we designed a few years ago among the high school directors that starts to attempt to educate the kids and their families, as early as 6th and 7th grade.
They're probably eyeing it even.
I mean, they're already looking at potential colleges when they're in middle school.
Yeah.
So we're sharing ways that they can work their schedule to fit orchestra in all 4 years. So, in our particular district, there are options to take courses over the summer. So we really push certain courses for the kids to enroll in over the summer. They can also take online courses. I think it's really funny they could take PE online.
Yeah, I always thought that. Yeah, it's like, go do 25 push-ups. Did you do them? Click yes. It's like, that's how I always picture that working.
But for a lot of the kids who are in orchestra, I mean, this is an awful stereotype, but they're perfectly fine doing that. They no interest in taking a PE class, and they're happy to do it online if they can.
Yeah.
So, we're distributing that kind of material from the start. I would also say at the middle schools, we're trying to just build a sense of pride in them. We're really lucky to have really successful orchestras where we teach. And we want the kids to feel like they're part of something special and that they're part of something that's bigger than any one of us. So we try to instill that in them as early as possible. I was just at one of our feeder middle schools at their beginner concert, and we were already talking to the parents about just how special it is to get to be in the feeder pattern that they're in and that their kids get to be part of this orchestra team.
Now, are y'all able to bring a group down and do that when they have like a beginner performance? Like, do any of the high schools get to bring a group down? Yeah,
so actually at all 4 of our feeder middle schools, we have it worked out between my campus and then Matt's and Shupton High School, that the top orchestra from one of those 3 schools performs at every middle school beginner concert.
And they get to just see it, right? Like, this is what is possible in 7 years or whatever, 7 or 8 years.
It's actually one of the most exciting performances you do because it's all about possibility in the future for those families and those kids who are there.
When you get to turn right to the kids and the parents and say, this is what happens when you listen to your orchestra director about the straightness of your left hand wrist and this, and you listen every time they give you instruction, you too can make this varsity orchestra and stuff like that. It's fun to be able to just look right at them and say, all this stuff you're being told is important. Yeah.
I always drop the line that every kid who is playing in the high school group was a beginner at some point.
Yep.
I mean, everybody is a beginner, and all it takes is hard work and dedication to climb that ladder. At the high school level, so we've been working on them since middle school. At the high school level, I think by that point, they already know if it's something that they are interested in, if it's something they have a passion about. So just being visible to them at the high school and letting them get to know us as the senior high directors a little bit. And Matt does the exact same thing at the middle schools. We're just trying to get there and get in front of the kids, be able to start building a relationship with them, because it's scary to change campuses, to move up to the big campus that whatever the next one is looming overhead. And for the kids to be able to go to that new campus already knowing one or two of the teachers, in a way that they feel is meaningful, does a lot to make them comfortable to go ahead and sign up for your class that next year. So, I mean, Matt, like when you're at the middle schools, what are you doing to...
I'm just being present. Sometimes our directors at the middle school have me pulling out a section, working with a kid on all region music, or sometimes just grading practice records. I mean, I'm just there. I'm there to say hi to students each time, and I try to make it a point to say hi to a new kid each week, or a group of new students that I haven't really had a chance to get to learn their name, and the relationships start there. But just like Ryan said, if they already know a teacher going into a new campus, it really makes a difference on whether or not they're going to stay, or they're going to continue orchestra in our case.
So we have a pretty detailed campus visitation schedule set up at West that's taken some time to develop and always work out. I feel like we're most successful this year. So currently what we have going is that every week I visit one of the high schools, and that alternates. I just switch back and forth each week between Jasper and Shepton. And then my colleague, Amy, she visits the other campus. And then also every week I make it my goal to visit one of the feeder middle schools. In the past, I felt like I was really ineffective when I was visiting the middle schools, because I would be there when beginner classes were happening. And, you're not going to go in and teach somebody's beginner class. They have their own groove and their own thing going on. So I've actually changed it this year, and it's been going great so far. I just made a big Excel spreadsheet of when every middle school and high school orchestra in our cluster rehearses. And I've just been checking the boxes and just visiting a middle school and working with their performing groups, their 7th and 8th graders. And the goal is to work with each group in the cluster at least one time this semester. And then hopefully I'll repeat that next semester. Yeah. So that in theory, if I can keep this going for years and years, by the time a kid reaches Plano West, they'll have had me rehearse their orchestra at least twice in each prior year.
Yeah.
So 8 times minimum. And then there's classes that fit my schedule that are easier to visit that, I see the kids 4 or 5 times in a semester.
Yeah. So we're 8 weeks into school. How's it been going so far?
It's been great. I've been to every middle school now, and both of the high schools, of course. And it's fun, but it's also really eye-opening, because you just see, these 6 different campuses, and they all operate in such different ways, but they're all operating in their own great ways.
In their own positive way.
Yeah.
They've got their own thing.
When I'm visiting, I kind of joke with the directors that I'm there to be, crazy Uncle Ryan. When I'm there working with the middle school kids, I don't presume to be going there and sharing some great knowledge with their orchestras. I just want to have fun with the kids, be a little bit silly, help them get better at something on their music. But really, I just want to build that personal connection with the groups, instead of trying to be some sort of expert who is coming into work. We've done some other things too. This is one that we actually stole from you, Kevin. We've adopted the whole all city thing.
And I stole it from band, so yeah.
So any 8th grader in our cluster who auditions for all region, they will be rewarded by having a day out of school. And we do it, on a Friday usually. And just, they come over to the senior high. All the high school directors come over too. We work with the kids on music for the day, put on a little concert, eat pizza, play some games with our officers, give them a tour of the senior high. So that's been kind of developing the last 3 years, and we're, I think, seeing good things from that.
Yeah.
Some of the other kind of maybe more unique things that we've started doing. I actually send a personal letter to every kid in our cluster who makes all region. And this is at both the middle school and high school. Now, of course, this is just a form letter, but I use mail merge, so it's all personalized. It says their name and their instrument on the letter. And the way I have it set up, I can even drop in a little special note, like if a kid is concertmaster of their orchestra, I can have that be included in the letter. And so every year we just do this giant mailing, and it just tells them how proud I am of them and how, they are the reason that our orchestra in Plano West and the cluster is so strong, is because of hard workers like them. So, and I've had kids now who have started to come up who, they said like the first time they got that letter, that felt really special to them. And they don't know they don't know what mail merge is.
Yeah.
And then we've also...
Well, the thing is, all those things you just mentioned in those letters are very true.
Right.
It was just, the mail merge helps you do it...
To hundreds of kids.
Yeah, to hundreds of people, yeah.
And then something that we do just with the 9th and 10th graders, we have some joint socials between our cluster. So, we have a shared banquet, and then we have a big Thanksgiving dinner that's between the cluster. So my orchestra officers at Plano West will send a handmade invitation to the 9th and 10th grade schools, personally inviting them to Thanksgiving. That's a new thing this year, Matt, which I don't think have arrived at the campuses yet.
Nope, not yet.
But they're working on those now. And then we send them Valentine's also. Just so they get a note from a senior high kid saying, Happy Valentine's Day. It has some terrible music fun on it.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But I don't know if it makes a difference or not, but it again, just trying to make those connections between the campuses.
So it sounds like a lot of these things are things, like, not that you weren't doing things before, but it sounds like you've implemented a lot of stuff in the last few years. Are you seeing, like, I know we all know that numbers are not everything.
Right.
But numbers are a good indicator of something like that working. Have you noticed a big uptick in either of these campuses?
Well, absolutely. When I took over Plano West, we were at 174 kids, and we're at 253 this year.
Yeah.
So,
undoubtedly,
something is happening to keep them in. But at the same time, both of our feeder campuses at Jasper and Shepton have grown as well. So this is a cluster effort to keep these kids in. This is not, happening at just any one place.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something I think we're always, as orchestra directors, whether at middle school or high school, trying to figure out is like what students say is their reason for staying in or for getting out of orchestra from one year to the next. Obviously you were talking about the GPA thing for a lot of them and stuff. What are some of the other reasons that you've heard, either on the positive, like they're staying in, or on the negative side of thing that you've heard from students over the years that's maybe the reason they're not staying in? I'm knowing you, I doubt they say, I don't like you, Mr. Ross, I don't want to stay in, but like things like, I don't know, other classes, situations in their life, I don't know.
Well, I think ultimately the reason kids stay in is just because they feel good about what they're doing. They feel successful in whatever way is unique to them. And with a program as large as ours, there's a huge disparity in ability levels. So success for one kid in one of the upper groups is going to look very different than how a kid in the lower group defines success. So I think that, and them just feeling like they are appreciated. That's any teacher, right? Just that they're known and noticed and valued in some sort of way. That's hard. With 250 kids coming through the room every day, it takes a concerted effort to
make everybody feel,
to connect with as many kids as you can. So actually, we've done some really fun things. I don't know if this is part of your question or not, but one thing that has just taken off, and this was the idea of Amy, my colleague at West, is Sticker Thursday. So every Thursday, the kids just get stickers at the end of the class. And they're all, you would never believe that 17 and 18-year-olds care about stickers this passionately. And they go crazy for it. And the cool thing is that some of those kids who sit totally quiet in the back of the room, who never engage with you, you say hi to them as they walk in the room and they just walk past you. They are the first one up there quietly getting their sticker. So it's at least that chance once a week with that kid.
I'm picturing like several of my kids right now being the ones that would walk up and be like, yes.
I mean, even if it's just that one time that week that you get to have a minimal conversation with them, that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the stickers. One of the things that the kids are really excited about that's coming up in, I think, 2 weeks, it's called Bad Candy Week. And it's the week of Halloween. So actually, I just ordered $150 of candy off Amazon on Friday. Each
Did you
day,
type in bad candy?
I did some research on this, but each day of the week, every kid in the orchestra is going to get a new piece of terrible candy to try. So we have circus peanuts, we have
That's a pretty bad one.
Bit O Honey, candy corn, of course, Bazooka bubblegum. I hope Bazooka doesn't sue you guys. And one other one, but regardless. We're already kind of hyping it up to them, so they're getting excited about that. So
I think pretty great.
It's just a way for them to be a part of a community and have some fun.
And so, to be clear, you guys have purchased all the candy and you're giving it out to the students each day?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not kids swapping with each other?
Correct. And I'm sure
like competing for worst candy.
I imagine kids have asked if they can bring some of their own awful candy.
They haven't thought that far ahead yet, but but that might be
someone will at one point. Yeah,
it's gonna happen. Yeah.
So I think the short answer is just kids stay in when they feel like they're part of a community, and when they feel like they are being successful and having a good time.
And one thing I don't think I remember you mentioning is banquet.
Right.
Just it feels like one high school having an event rather than three high schools.
That's right. Y'all do your 9 through 12. Y'all do your banquet all together.
Yeah. So that was a new thing that we implemented. When I went to West and Matt went to Jasper, because prior to then it was just this exclusive Plano West junior senior thing, and so one example of what we do is that each of our orchestra officers challenge each other to a dance battle. So every year, and it's gotten more and more out of control each year in a good way. There's a dance battle between the West, Jasper, and Shepton officers, and a little friendly competition, but they really look forward to it. Last year my kids, Plano West had never won, because the seniors by that point they're ready for college. Yeah. But last year seniors were like, we are going to win this thing. So they started rehearsing back in like February to be ready for this dance performance in May. So I think thanks Matt for mentioning that, because I think the banquet has helped to make us feel like a single family.
Yeah.
Which is so hard because we are spread, across so many different campuses.
Yeah, we're 7 different campuses.
Yes, 7.
Well, so, I mean, I guess this is one that I kind of imagine the 3 of us each answering, because I think everybody handles this in a different way, but inevitably you run into that time each year, usually sometime in February or March, where a kid comes in and says, Mr. Ross, I don't think I'm going to be able to do orchestra next year. And that conversation can go a bunch of different ways. I guess I was curious how y'all handle when that happens.
Well, my question is, do they tell you when they're not continuing?
Well, I guess there's the other side of it. Sometimes you don't know.
Most of the time I finally get the rosters, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid's out, and this kid. And of course they have not mentioned it.
Well, I guess, maybe this is because of something else that we have like a letter of intent that they turn in and say, I'm going to be in, I'm most likely going to be in, I'm most likely not, or I'm definitely not. And there's usually a little spot on there where they can say, I need a different class to graduate. That way we can see, because then we're able to go, okay, this one seems a little suspect. Like, why is this one leaving? This doesn't seem like the kid I know and then we can have a conversation with that kid. But I don't know, do y'all experience mostly kids just kind of going silently in the night, and then you're like, oh, where'd they go?
I was going to say, I applaud you for doing that, because I don't think I would have the stomach.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
I take it so personally still when kids drop, that if I had to collect in forms and look through it myself and see who was not planning to continue, I would just not handle that well.
Yeah, I think there's other high schools that do surveys on tell me how I'm doing. And
I don't go that far. Usually it says something like, I don't enjoy playing my instrument anymore. It might be something like that, which sometimes they check that, and I'm fine with it. Like I'm okay with that idea. I guess I was just thinking, do you sometimes have students that come to you, and how do you handle it if they do?
Yeah, well, I think, like Matt said, we definitely have more conversations because we initiate the conversation after we get that roster sometime in the spring. And, there's a lot of reasons why. And I guess as I've gotten older, I have gotten a little bit better at just kind of letting them go free when it's right for them. Yeah. And you kind of have a sense on the kid is like, are they doing this for the right reasons? A lot of times at our level, at the senior high, because, there's only 1 year left, it's their senior year, they really are needing to meet some sort of graduation requirement. And of course, they need to graduate more than they need to stay in orchestra. Yeah. And if that's the problem, then of course. I mean, I guess, Matt, you catch them more at that critical time.
I guess I do. For me, it's regardless of whichever kid it is, even if it's one of your most challenging students who cannot stay on task, I think one of my first things is to just make sure that they understand what happens if they do get out of orchestra at 9th or 10th grade, because they've already invested 4 or 5 years, and maybe they're not fully thinking that, I want to go try this elective next year. And well, if they weren't so sure about getting out of orchestra in the first place, and then they try, art, and then they realize, I got to come back. Well, now they're a year behind where all of their friends are, and it's just so much harder. And I always tell the students that are thinking about getting out, like, when you get out, it's just so much more difficult to get back in, and you will find excuses on why you can't come back in. You might miss it and be like, man, well, I haven't been a year, I haven't spent a year on it, I haven't touched my instrument. I guess it's too late for me. I think it's just so easy to build up the reasons why you can't get back in. And especially for the kids that enjoy it, just helping them understand what it's, or, putting in perspective what it's going to be like if they do not have orchestra on their schedule anymore, and that they're replacing that with sitting at another desk with another textbook.
Yeah, you definitely give a better answer to that than I did, Matt. I think what you said reminded me of a few things, though, that we'd share with the kids. One of the ideas that we're always pushing towards them, even all the way back to middle school, is that, colleges are looking for kids who have demonstrated a long-term commitment to growth and improvement and has a passion in something. So a commitment to orchestra all the way through 12th grade really does a lot to show a college that you care about something, and that you can stick with it and grow long term, because that's what makes a kid successful in college, of course. So we always ask them, how will it look if all of a sudden you've had orchestra on your transcript all these years and then it's just disappeared senior year? What does that say about a person who finishes what they begin? And then there's a quote somewhere, but nobody when they're 50 years old says, somebody who had stayed in music, nobody says, I wish I had quit piano when I was younger. I mean, the conversation is always, I wish I hadn't quit piano or quit violin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just find, with those conversations with the kids, it feels like half of the time, it warrants a deeper conversation, because they'll come in and say something along the lines of like, I just don't enjoy playing my instrument anymore, or I want to do this and this. And if for even a moment it rings untrue, or something feels a little funny, usually a few follow-up questions reveals that maybe they have some like self-confidence issues with playing. They don't think they're very good. Like, I hear that probably half the time is they might say, I really want to try this art class, and you talk to them for even like 5 minutes and they're like, I just don't think I'm very good. And then you realize they love orchestra. They don't actually want to quit. There's just, they need some encouragement, and, you find a way to be there for them. Mm-hmm. I just feel like it's always been, Louisville has added 100 students since I got there. And I have never been pushy with the kids. Like, I tell them all the time, I tell them the entire class, if orchestra is not your thing anymore, I want you to go do something that makes you happy. You're only in high school once, so go do that. And, and it feels like taking that approach with them and not pressuring them, but just talking through the logic of it. Like I say, I think you alluded to something about this, like you get to come in and spend, at my school, 90 minutes of your day with like an instrument made of wood and metal, and you like get to make music instead of sitting at a desk. And it's like, you may not think during, because they always have to sign up when we're in the middle of UIL season, of course, and like all they're thinking about is the beat down of the daily grind of rehearsals. But it's like, if that goes away, like you said, you're replacing it sitting in another math class, or you're sitting in something like that. It's like, you might not think you'd miss it, but This is an important part of your day.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned just putting out there that you respect whatever decision they make. Because I found that every student, like I said, they will not tell us that they're getting out of orchestra. We find out by getting our rosters from the counselor sometime in the spring, and you pull that kid in, and most of the time they're just so terrified that they're going to disappoint you. They don't want to talk about it. And so I've found most often that I just kind of put it right out in front. I say, look, I respect any decision you make. I just want to talk with you through it. And then they open up much easier about what's really going through. They like orchestra, they love it, but they also love debate, or they love art, and they want to focus on that more. And so I've just found that putting that up front, just like, look, I'm not going to force you to stay here, is really, really beneficial in terms of getting out of the kids whatever it is that's really on their mind.
So a project this is a very long-term project, but I've started talking to some of our alumni at Solo and Ensemble, but even more since then, and encouraging them to submit to us, just 2 or 3 minutes recorded on their iPhone, talking to current students about what orchestra meant to them and kind of what it means to them in retrospect, now that they're in college and they're doctors and business majors and all that stuff.
That's really nice.
And so the idea, hopefully, is we can get in 10 or 11 of these videos and have one of our students edit it into a 5 to 10 minute video presentation that we can start sharing with the kids as they're coming up through the program, to just hear, because they hear it from adults telling them all the time what orchestra should mean to them, but to hear it from another student and someone who's much closer to their age and who has just gone through it, we hope will be a really great message to share.
And I'd say a lot of the kids are coming back letting us know how they really feel about the GPA game now, and how much it really mattered now that they're on their own.
Right. You can make it.
Is that good? The end of the thought.
But I think just overall, the reason our cluster is just doing so well with retention is your big front on educating them early on which classes do matter, and the alternatives by doing credit by exam or e-school, and just overall what colleges are looking for. I think just getting that in their ear early on lets them know that they can still continue doing an elective that they like, such as orchestra.
Right.
And for that matter, any elective that they're really into.
Another project that we've talked about, and no headway has been made on it yet, is actually sitting down and interviewing some college admissions officers. It turns out, I didn't know this, that a lot of the big schools, places like Harvard or Yale, they actually have recruiting officers throughout the country, who are stationed in, for example, Dallas, who work on recruiting throughout Texas. And I want to start sitting down with them and actually getting it on video from their mouths, what it is that they're actually looking for. Because again, the parents have this one idea that it's the GPA and that's it, and test scores. And we've all heard ourselves that that's not the case, that they're looking for a much more holistic student, but it's hard to, you can't argue with a video. We share quotes from like newspaper articles and other material of college admissions officers saying this, but then, I've even heard that some parents think that we have doctored those quotes because we're orchestra teachers and we want to keep the kids in orchestra. So if we can actually get a Harvard admissions officer on video saying this, and University of Texas officer saying this, I think that will also be very enlightening for our families.
At least until the families assume that we're hiring an actor.
Yeah.
So.
How do we know that guy actually
That's a
works
great
there?
idea. Hiring.
There you go. We should just hire the
We
actor.
can make him say whatever we want.
Just
Yeah.
have one of us with a wig and a mustache doing all the
That
talking.
looks like Mr. Moreno.
Nobody would know you, Kevin. So you
That's
could-
right. It could be me. It could be me. I'd be a terrible actor. Don't pick me. Do you have any follow-up questions for any of that stuff?
I don't know. I mean, is there anything else you want to
What
just talk about? Any other overall thoughts you have with retention and recruitment? And I feel like you've touched on quite a bit.
I think it ultimately just boils down to being seen. It's really that simple. I mean, sharing material is helpful, and having shared socials is helpful. But really, if I had to put my money somewhere, I think just the fact of showing up on campus as often as possible does more to help with our retention from campus to campus than anything else. Do you feel the same way, Matt?
I do, and I was just thinking, what are we doing within our campus for retention? Like,
Right.
so from juniors to seniors, and I think that boils down to what you're doing every day for the
Of
kids.
course, yeah.
So that they're leaving, hopefully feeling better than what they did the day before on their instrument. And I kind of always stick with this rule of just leaving the orchestra better than you found them.
The campsite rule.
Yeah.
Always
Yeah.
leave the campsite
Yeah.
nicer than when you got there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're supposed to do that. Well, yeah, you mentioned being seen. I was my first thought was immediately, you were talking about going from campus to campus, and my first thought was, how would that translate just within your own campus, and just like for the individual student, being seen like one-on-one with them, just as much interaction you can have with an individual student, so they don't feel like because some of your groups are how big? Like,
We're at like 55 kids for our biggest group this year.
yeah, and I mean, like, in a 45-minute class, 50-minute class,
Yeah.
So,
50, I think.
like trying to even like have a personal connection with each of them one-on-one is it's an important goal, even if it's a difficult one each time.
Well, and on my campus, we have 6 orchestra periods that I split those as lead teacher with my colleague. And I'll pull out sectionals and work with her groups. But there are days where I'm just in the office, getting flight agendas ready for the spring trip or whatever. And I do have to sometimes remind myself, like, go out and make a joke for 2 minutes in her class before I go back to the computer. Just so that, I haven't sat in my office the entire class period, while second period is happening with Amy.
I just pictured your phone like lighting up in front of you on the desk as a reminder that says "make a joke," and you go, oh, "Yeah, I gotta go do that." Yeah. Well, so this because you helped us get the Google form to them, but we asked some students if they had any questions for you.
Oh no.
One of them asked, do you think that dedication/hard work or happiness/enjoyment is more important in a musician? Can one exist without the other?
Wow.
I know that was a really deep one.
I could make some guesses on what student asked that.
Oh yeah.
But so ultimately, in the long run, happiness and enjoyment, I hope, is what drives every musician. But I mean, to grow as a musician and to develop on your instrument sometimes takes working through periods of just total misery, and frustration. So like, I don't think it's realistic to think that it can all just be sunshine and rainbows all the time. Mm-hmm. If you're truly trying to help students, better themselves as musicians, there's times where you just have to kind of just keep pushing. And it's not always the most fun, but they come out the other end better for it. Mm-hmm. And hopefully in reflection, they feel the same way as well, that, whatever they invested to get there was worth some of the blood, sweat, and tears. But I mean, at the end of the day, they should feel good about being a musician.
Yeah.
What's the hardest part about getting your students to agree with your interpretation of a piece?
I don't think that's hard at all.
Yeah?
I mean, I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way.
Yeah.
But I mean, even with some incredible musicians that I get to work with every day,
Yeah.
their just experience is so limited. I mean, I've got to spend at this point, 20 years listening to the same Beethoven symphony, played by 100 different orchestras. So, I mean, I just have such a broader worldview to draw on when talking about Beethoven. So I feel like I can speak pretty authoritatively to them about what we're trying to accomplish, and they don't really put up much objection to it.
I have to agree, because essentially we're their first interpretation.
Yeah.
They're a pretty clean slate. They'll have never, for most cases, they'll have never played Elgar Serenade before, or Dvorak. I mean, this is the first time that they're learning it, so it is pretty easy to mold their idea on how it should go collectively.
Yeah, because even if they have the best, left hand and right hand technique in the world, they haven't thought deeply about Elgar and that serenade, or about Mozart and all the implications that come with it. They are blank slate is the way to put it.
Yeah.
Where it's more difficult actually are the lower orchestras, and it's not that they have to agree with the interpretation, but they just have to be able to do it.
To make an interpretation.
Right. Yeah, to be able to have the facility in their bow arm to play this kind of staccato, for example.
Yeah.
That's where the bigger challenge is.
Yeah.
It's the kids who have less of the proficiency.
Yeah.
I figured this one would be, of all the ones we sent in, this would be a good one for you. If you could conduct any orchestra in the world for one concert cycle, which orchestra would you choose and what repertoire would you perform? In short, describe your dream concert with an exclamation point.
That's such an unfair question.
You get to pick one.
Only one. I mean, of course.
He's smiling a lot.
I guess
the
the answer should be Berlin. I mean, it's kind of agreed that that's the Cadillac of orchestras right now in the world. But there's something about Vienna when I watch them play that there's just a joy in their playing that might be really fun to work with.
Yeah.
But what program? I mean, gosh. I mean, Beethoven is my homeboy, as I always say. So it's hard to not have Beethoven on a program like that. But I mean, I think if you have like one shot with the Berlin Philharmonic, then I mean, you got to do like a Mahler or two or something. Got to go big, because you're not going to have that chance ever again.
How have your ideas about teaching changed over the years? You've been doing it enough time that it's probably changed over the years, besides just one level to the next of...
A kid asked that question?
Yeah.
Wow. I think I've mellowed in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I think I've, from a strictly like teacher standpoint, I've learned to take things less personally. I still do. But when there's like, especially like discipline issues, I'm much more patient in getting a class on board with expectations than maybe I used to be. And I think it probably works better now, though.
I'm the same way, yeah.
Yeah.
Discipline is very different now.
Yeah, totally. But I think also I don't know if I've changed in this regard, but I've just become better at it. Is just being able to meet each orchestra where they're at, and even more beyond that, try to just understand what it is that motivates this orchestra. So the way I approach, I know that, there's a certain school of education that says you approach every class the exact same way, in terms of your expectations and this and that. And I don't think I actually agree with that as much as I maybe would have at one point. The thing that drives my top orchestra is something very, very different than something that's driving, say, our fifth or sixth orchestra. And to try to push them and challenge them in the same ways, even developmentally appropriate ways, is missing the point for those kids. They're there for very different reasons oftentimes. So I think, I teach them differently. With my top group, I can absolutely have the expectation that you go home and you'll practice this and you'll work this up and come back prepared. But, I teach our lower groups as if they never will touch their instrument outside of the classroom. And, you still, of course, give lip service to, like, guys, you need to go home and practice this. But deep down that they're not going to. By junior and senior year especially, they're not going to.
So you tell them that, and then you go into the office and start crafting the next day's plan
according
to, so they didn't, and now what are we going to do?
Yeah, but And I think I've just learned to have more successful class periods as a teacher because of that realization. Mm-hmm. And I know that's probably not the most kosher answer, but
well, we had this conversation the other day. We might have even been recording when we did it. And we came and we both were like nodding, and he said the same thing I was thinking in my head, and then you just said the same thing. So I think that's what a lot of us probably have to do.
So I'm curious to hear what you have to say, just how your teaching has changed. And how many years are you in?
This is year 12.
Okay.
I think definitely the discipline thing, the not taking things personally is probably the best way to say it. I know that my first year, like, just this idea in my head that if I make a kid angry, they're never going to like my class again. And then I realized that if you're fair about it mm-hmm. and equal to all students, if you say, you can't do that, and they get mad and they walk out, they'll come in the next day and go, Mr. Slater! They're like, oh, good morning. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, oh, we're fine. Yeah. Okay, great. And like, so that was a big one. And for me, just not...
I think that oftentimes they actually are just are glad that you cared enough about them being successful. They sometimes appreciate that even.
Yeah. Yeah, well, then you get some other students that sometimes say, like, they'll come to you and tell you, I really appreciate that you've started being tougher with our class about preparation or discipline or something, because it's made the class more enjoyable for me now too. Like you not only have not damaged your reputation with one kid, but you have improved your reputation with several other students that really want it to go well. Mm-hmm. Other thing for me that's been big over time is as less things surprise you, and there are always still things that surprise me. I'll tell you about one here in a little bit, but like the less that surprises you, the easier it is for you to go in and very confidently handle any class period on any given day. And as a person who started with a very varied background, not a lot of strings until college, for me, most of what's changed over time is slowly accepting things that clinicians have come in and said time and time again, or judges' sheets. It's like, hey, Matt and I were talking the other day, like, one of the later things that happened in my time of teaching has been implementing like bow speed matching, exact bow placement matching, and all of this kind of stuff, and like making sections blend. And it was just always somewhere in my mind, some stubborn part that was just like, that's got to be the least of the things. We got to be in tune, we got to be together and all this stuff, and just realizing like, no, this is like everything. And so like for me, one of the biggest teaching things that's changed is when we get a new piece, we are working in the correct style and the correct bow placement from day one, even with all the bad notes that are going on while they figure it out. What about you, Matt? What's changed most for you?
I was trying to think of anything you guys haven't mentioned, because I have just gotten more patient. I felt like I had so many expectations that were, untouchable. It had to be a certain way, a certain format with teaching the kids, and each group had a plan, and they, no matter what, they need to be up to here. Beginners need to be touching the third position already by the end of the year. They need to be playing on all strings. And I think especially in middle school, I discovered that not every group of beginners coming through is going to be the exact same, and it's just not worth all the stress to try and get them to wherever last year's group was. Like, you just go at their pace and just make sure each day that they're getting a little bit better at a time, and then that really translates over to high school as well. I've learned mostly that teaching high school and teaching middle school is almost no different from each other in terms of the way you're covering concepts with them, with bow control, tempo, rhythms, clapping, all that stuff. One of my favorite clinicians is Angie Cimbalo, and I think the biggest thing that I've taken from watching her over the years is she's the same person that, if she's in front of a group of high school students, she's the same person in front of a group of beginners, and she's the same person sitting in my office having a conversation with me. And I think that's something that's settled in with me more. Like, I don't have to try and put on a big act to get the kids to do what I want anymore. I think if I'm just more myself and consistent, it's going to translate to anything with teaching.
Well, I think this would be a good final one. Probably a little similar. Someone said, what expectations do you have for your students? And really, what is the ultimate goal in teaching those kids that you hold most dear? Knowing, I always think about things as like, what is the percentage? Like 2% of students go on to do anything with music outside of high school. Right. And like knowing that, like, what is the ultimate goal?
It's just to build a lifelong lover of music. I mean, hopefully that instrument comes out again in 10 years once they're graduated out of college and they can play at church or something. But even if that's not the case, that they can turn on a radio or hear a movie and appreciate what they're hearing, go to a concert every once in a while. That would be, I think, certainly my goal with my students in the big picture. And I think on the next level down is just that, good things in life are worth working hard for. And if you work hard, it's going to pay off for you, hopefully.
We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Ryan Ross. The featured educational work at the end of today's episode is Sandra Dachau's arrangement of Danse Bacchanal from Samson and Delilah by Sanson. Listed as a grade 4, you can find it at luxmusic.com. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, shoot us an email at rightofstring@gmail.com.
Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts and join us for our next episode.
See you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.